Welcome back to the Ready State. I want to take a second and talk about a post we put up as a quote tile not too long ago. What we're talking about there in that quote tile was espresso and THC or red wine and coffee or bulletproof coffee and red wine or Adderall and Ambien. And it was a little controversial, and I'll say only a little bit controversial because some of the people who were taking Adderall needed it for medical reasons. And some of the people who were using THC were using it because they had cancer, which seems very reasonable. But that wasn't what the intention was at all. One of the things that we're always trying to do is we take our systems approach to trying to improve how sort of the health and environment of the human organism is working. Is that we in this systems approach, and as we're talking about movement quality, we're like, is this a movement problem, a technique issue, or motor control? Is this a joint capsule problem? Is it a sliding surface problem? Sometimes we'll describe something as a muscle dynamic problem, right? But underlying those, there's a lot of environmental issues. And so sometimes we say, hey, we're maximizing what we can control here. But as our friend Greg Cook says, sometimes we find that the organism is in a toxic environment. And when it comes to understanding sort of those first principles around getting people to function at our highest levels, given the real world demands that most of us face, we have to say, well, what can we control? And one of the things that we prioritize is sleep density and sleep quality, even over quantity. And one of the things that happens is that it's easy to get behind on your sleep, wake up in the morning, feeling like you need a whole bunch of extra coffee, and then by the time you get to 3 or 4 o'clock, you may have an extra coffee there. And what we're seeing then is that I've used some of these stimulants to get myself up and through the day, which, trust me, I've had a couple businesses, I've had some babies. There was a time where I was drinking way too much coffee, given. But then to hit the brakes, oftentimes to fall asleep, for a whole host of reasons, we end up leaning on some depressants to make ourselves feel like we can fall asleep. And there are times absolutely in peak stress where that is an appropriate choice. I totally get it. So if we pan back for a second, what we're really talking about is how do I self-medicate so that I can feel better? Okay, as an aside, leaving the ethics and morality aside or your value judgment, what I want to say is that what we find is that we're trying to untangle the complexity of the human experience. We often have to make sure that we understand that this depressant stimulant cycling is really affecting the quality of my sleep. And then if I'm going to improve the quality of my sleep, which is what this original post was about, is that I've got to start to think about how these systems are sort of coupled or conjoined, which means if I have caffeine after 4 o'clock, the half-life of that caffeine in my system is a long time. And what we know is that for most of us, even if we're fast caffeine metabolizers, coffee after 4 can disrupt not our ability to fall asleep necessarily, sometimes it does, but our ability to sleep deeply. And if I'm stressed and having coffee at 4 because I'm tired, what ends up happening is I can have poor sleep, wake back up again, and once again fall into this trap where I feel like I haven't had good sleep, so I'm using coffee and 5-hour energy to get through my day, and then that gets in this ugly cycle. If I'm super stressed, feel like I can't fall asleep, one of the things that we see is that people will lean on glasses of wine or have a beer or have a scotch or whiskey or THC in order for them to fall asleep. And that works for a minute, but the problem is, of course, quality of our sleep isn't very good. And then we get up in the morning and boom, we see that we get either trapped on the front end or the back end sometimes of our behaviors that disrupt these fundamental biologic sort of conditions that make it so that we can make progress. And one of the things that we're always saying is, hey, let's control what we can control. And one of the ways that we try to bring some clarity and some awareness to this process is to say, hey, look, let's start thinking about your sleep behavior earlier in the day. And there are a couple things that we get asked a lot are like, what do you think are big determinants on how well I'm going to sleep? One is if you can limit your caffeine or keep your caffeine consumption before 4 p.m., if you're a fast caffeine metabolizer before noon, if you know that caffeine really affects you and you're sensitive, then that will make a difference in your ability to fall asleep and stay asleep. The second thing is we try to recommend that people are actually moving more in the day. And some of the elite groups that we work with, one of the first things that we prescribe in those organizations is to track movement, believe it or not, and I'm talking about non-exercise activity. So oftentimes what we see is that athletes who are training really hard under really stressful conditions, these might be war fighters, they might be actual athletes, might be moms and dads trying to squeeze in that run at lunch, they're actually not accumulating enough activity to actually feel fatigue and to initiate that sleep or to feel sleepy at night. So even though I've trained during the day, I actually haven't moved enough during the day. So a recommendation for them is to try to hit these 10,000 steps in a day so that we can start to accumulate enough fatigue so that I don't have to reach out, maybe reach for an exogenous substance so that I feel, so that I feel tired and then kind of fall into this really disordered sleep pattern and then wake up feeling tired. So understand that we also, and this is highly controversial and totally personal, but we find and we recommend that if we're trying to sort out sleep quality, alcohol has been shown and demonstrated time and time again. Our friends at Whoop have done a really good job of demonstrating and putting that context into our friends athletes' hands that alcohol definitely disrupts your sleep. And so we're not saying alcohol is good or bad, we're just saying it's a choice, and in this situation, it's a stressor. So in our athletic populations, we say, hey, look, maybe since we're really trying to make gains and we're trying to maximize the adaptation to the exercise stimulus, it may be better for us in the long haul to only drink when we're highly, highly rested, when we're unstressed, which is typically how most of us are not using alcohol. I need a beer, right? I need 2 fingers of whiskey, otherwise I'm gonna kill myself and my kids and I'm gonna quit my job and leave the house. So what we wanna do is, again, be thinking about this depressant stimulant cycling as a model for understanding one of the things that ends up being the great limiter for some of our sort of best adaptation, best success as an athlete, and that is sleep. So whether you are an athlete, a person who's just trying to get by, we just want to bring awareness that sometimes we're engaged in these behaviors that are tightly coupled that end up having ripple effects down the line. So again, THC, coffee, Ambien, and Adderall, these are all our not theoretical experiences. These are us working in high performance sports, talking about the things that we're seeing that smart, bright people are trying to do to make themselves feel better, to cope with the stress and the demands of their job. We just want to be much more aware that these things have a cost, and we want to be conscious of them so that we can lean on when we need to leave on them, and that the rest of the time we can begin to untangle this human performance web. So there you go. That's our alcohol, caffeine, stimulant, depressant cycling, and more importantly, it's about you being aware so that you can affect your sleep more effectively.